All right, well, welcome everybody. My name is Kelsey Rettke. I'm editor of the Daily Chronicle. I'm here with our candidates for DeKalb County Board Districts 5 through 9. Thank you for joining us today, you guys. We're gonna be doing a little Q&A, get to know you guys, talk about your platform a little bit. We did have two candidates who were unable to join us today, so that's gonna be Craig Roman, who's running for District 6, and Terry Mann Lamb, who's running for District 7, but we'll go ahead and get started with you guys. So we'll start with introductions. We'll give you guys each 2 minutes. Just share your name, why you're running, what your party affiliation is, what district you would be representing. And why don't we just go ahead and we'll start with Neil.
Great, good afternoon. Thanks, Kelsey, for having us. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet the other candidates as well. My name's Neil Mohammed. I'm a Democratic candidate for the 9th County Board District in DeKalb, Illinois. Grew up here in DeKalb, graduate of DeKalb Public Schools, including DeKalb High School. It's my second time running for public office. I previously ran for Illinois 16th Congressional District in 2018, which is how I met some of the folks on this call, I think, originally, a couple of years ago. And I'm running for county board because I think it's just an opportunity to contribute. The issues that we deal with at a local level don't always get as much media coverage as maybe others do nationally, but they're nonetheless very important for people's quality of life. And I think we're seeing that right now, in particular, with our response to the COVID crisis and everything that's come along with that. In my day job, I actually work in the healthcare sector. I work as a consultant for hospitals and health systems all across the country. And what I do in a nutshell is help those hospitals get cheaper prescription drugs. I help them deal with insurance companies, help them deal with all the same challenges that we face as private citizens, unfortunately, in the healthcare system day to day. So I'm very much looking forward to the opportunity to serve, the opportunity to use what I've learned in the private sector, and particularly in the healthcare sector, just helping run big, complex organizations to contribute locally. So thanks again for having me.
Awesome. And we'll go with Sasha.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Kelsey. Thank you to you for hosting and to the Chronicle for providing us this venue. My name is Sasha Cohen, and I am the Libertarian candidate for County Board District 5. I'm running because in the last several years, I've become more politically active. When I was young, I was involved in a lot of single-issue advocacy, dealing with issues of drug policy and criminal justice reform, and we did a lot with state level work and with federal level advocacy. But at the end of the day, all politics is local. What we do in our communities and our towns and at the county level makes the biggest difference and the biggest direct impact on our daily lives. And that's sort of what motivated me to run. I come from a family of activists. My grandfather was a civil rights protester. My mother was an anti-war protester. And when she passed away last year, it really kind of gave me the push that I needed to carry that family legacy of activism and of fighting for justice in a better world.
Awesome. Thank you. And we'll go with Chris next.
Hello, my name's Chris Porterfield. Nice to meet you, Kelsey. Nice to meet all of you. Thank you to the Chronicle for doing this. I'm running as a Democrat for District 8. I'm one of the incumbents in District 8. I came to DeKalb in '71 as an undergraduate transfer student. And aside from going out in industry a little bit in the suburbs for a few years, I've been in DeKalb ever since. My wife, Susan Azar Porterfield, is a retired professor from Rockford University. I'm a retired administrator who taught a little tiny bit from Northern. And I'm doing this because I really want to serve. I enjoy serving. I feel it's a civic responsibility. And County Board is the outlet I've chosen for that. I'm involved in a number of different community organizations too. I volunteered for a long, long time at Ben Gordon. And I've been an active member of Stagecoach Community Theater since 1980, so a long time there. As I said, I really enjoy my time on county board, and I'm hoping I'll be able to serve longer there. Thank you.
Awesome. And we'll go with Kiara next.
Okay, so I'm Kiara Jones. I am running for DeKalb County Board, District 5. I'm a Democratic candidate for DeKalb, Illinois. I'm a full-time single parent to 3 beautiful children, and being a part of the county board, it gives me the opportunity to be the voice for my community. Living within the lower and middle class family, I too can relate to my neighbors. I know what resources and opportunities that we need that will help bring value to our community and will better us all. My father, he inspired me when I was a little girl, him being a community activist. He was a part of the community activist area for probably 20 years. So I watched him just serve in our community and attending meetings and just helping with ideas to better, the community as a whole. It was just beautiful to watch my dad. Just his ambition every day was just to help others. So that basically inspired me at a very young age. And so now, being 29 and in my generation now, I feel that I will be, a great role model to those that's upcoming in our future. So that's exactly why I am running for the DeKalb County Board, District 5.
Oh, we haven't
Sorry,
got
I forgot I was muted. Last but certainly not least, we'll go with Bill.
Thank you, Kelsey. It's a pleasure to be here and to be here with all the other candidates as well. Appreciate the Chronicle doing this. I think it's very important to keep the public informed about this. But I'm Bill Cummings. I go by Bill, and my legal name is William, and I'm on the ballot as William, but I go by Bill. And I spent 30 years at NIU teaching accounting, and retired a few years ago, actually in about 2016. And after 40 years in higher education. And I really feel I'm at the stage of life where, it's important to give back to my community, my county. I think it's important that all of us who are able to do that use our skills and our abilities to help our community. This is a tough time we're in. I'm sure we're going to talk about this a lot more. But this time of COVID and other issues in our society is certainly, this is a challenging time, and it does affect us locally. I think as somebody else said, all politics is local. In many ways, that's true. We have an important role. I think our health department, for instance, is a very important part of the dealing with the COVID virus. And DeKalb County has been pretty significantly affected. I think last I looked, we'd had over 60 deaths and quite a number of cases of that. So our health department is a very important part of things. Another thing I think that is important to keep in mind is that we have a lot of people now who are out of work, who were not before, and this puts a greater burden on all of us, certainly to help those who need help. There's a lot of need for food with many people, and medical care certainly is a big issue. And I'm sure these are things that perhaps we'll be talking about. But it really would be a pleasure for me, after many years in higher ed, it'd be a pleasure for me to be able to serve the county. So thank you very much.
Awesome. And I did just want to clarify one thing. You said 60 deaths, but as of today, it is 38 deaths. And today, I think we exceeded 1,600 cases in DeKalb County.
Okay.
So we are at, I believe, 1,613, I want to say.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification.
As of today, sure. I know there's a lot of numbers everywhere these days. So So we'll go ahead and get started with the questions. I'm going to start with let's do Kiara first. So what, in your opinion, are the two most pressing issues facing your district right now, and what are your proposed solutions to these issues? And actually, before you answer, maybe we should clarify for our viewers. So District 5 represents DeKalb Township. District 8 represents Cortland and DeKalb Townships, and then District 9 represents DeKalb Townships. So Kiara, back to the question, what in your opinion are the two most pressing issues facing your district right now, and what are your proposed solutions to them?
Okay, so the two main issues that I've been able to reach out with the neighbors and the residents here in DeKalb. Their main concern as of right now is child care. That is the main issue that a lot of my neighbors and people that reside in the 5th district have spoke to me about. And another one was healthcare. They are really stressing the fact about, COVID and their protection against it, and openings of small businesses and things of that nature. So my solution as far as for childcare, I know that it's needed. It's greatly needed, especially in my area. It's greatly needed. And I feel like if the protocols of COVID, is followed thoroughly, then I don't think it would be much of a big issue to our community. But childcare is mainly a one that I like to focus on, because I really feel like without having childcare, a lot of the single parents here in our neighborhood are affected by it, which means that they would lose their jobs, their employment, and then the children be affected because they're not being able to get the education that they properly are needed. So those are two things that I'm really just getting feedback from my community. And I just hope, in regards, I just hope that the protocols for COVID-19 is properly being used throughout the community, so that everyone, the families won't be affected so much.
All right, and Sasha, we'll do the same question for you next. What, in your opinion, are the two most pressing issues facing your district, and what are your proposed solutions?
Sure. So I think that really there's one big issue facing my district, and it expands out into a number of related issues, and that's a lack of economic opportunity. Poverty brings with it a lack of social mobility, a lack of access to education, a lack of access to childcare, and a lack of access to fresh and healthy food, which leads to worse health outcomes. It leads to shorter lifespans. And particularly for the people of my district in the North Glidden neighborhood, I live on Edgebrook Drive, and we are incredibly far away from cheap, healthy food outlets. There are a number of vacant lots that community activists have proposed turning into community centers or grocery stores or things like that. And I would like to see the old movie theater complex, as well as the large parking lot behind it, turned into a community-owned community center, garden, and co-op grocery store. Because until we provide those resources for people to feed themselves, to take care of themselves, to help each other, we won't be able to get anything done.
All right, and we'll do Neil next. What, in your opinion, are the two most pressing issues facing your district, and what are your solutions?
Sure. So I'll start with healthcare and specifically our response to the COVID vaccine. And the reason I say that is, I suppose, twofold. And one is that the effect of the pandemic, I think, is kind of upstream from a lot of the other issues we're talking about. I mean, Kiara mentioned childcare. We know that right now, given that students aren't physically present in school, that is itself a massive childcare challenge for just about any family in our district. And so the sooner we're able to, institute tracking and tracing, and especially, fingers crossed, because this is something outside our control that's going to be still unfortunately ways off, eventually participate in the distribution of an effective vaccine. And so I see the public health department in particular serving a key role in that, particularly in distribution of the vaccine to folks who are economically insecure, who may or may not have health insurance, may or may not be on Illinois Medicaid. So I think that's one issue, is making sure they have the resources and the expertise and frankly the manpower to do that work when, and I'll say when, that vaccine is available. Second, and I will ask quite a bit with economic development, but I would just say continuing to be stewards of the budget. Those dollars that the county is responsible for raising and spending are important for so many of the other functions that we're going to talk about today. And I think it's to their credit that previous county boards have done as good a job as they have passing budgets. Obviously, the degree of difficulty has just gone up substantially since last year, which I'm sure folks can speak to. But I think we got to work together in a bipartisan way to, yes, there may well be more painful cuts to come. This is an evolving situation. We know that, the economic outlook, particularly in our area, can vary quite a bit day to day. As those challenges continue to develop and we understand them in this next county board, I suspect we're going to have to spend a lot of energy dealing with that question.
All right, and we'll do Bill next. Bill, what in your opinion are the two most pressing issues facing your district, and what are your solutions?
Well, obviously, as almost everybody else has mentioned, I think dealing with the COVID virus is a serious issue for all of us. Having adequate health care. The county is going to be heavily involved in the distribution of a vaccine, as my understanding is that county governments are going to be involved in that once we have the vaccine. Hopefully that'll be early next year, but we'll see. And certainly for those who don't have a primary physician already, the health department may very well be their place that they will be able to get the vaccine from. So it's important, I think, that our health department be adequately funded and staffed so that when that time comes, and of course they already have plenty to do with testing. Of course, we're going into the flu season, so I know they're involved in flu vaccines as well. I think the other thing for my district particularly is high property taxes. Very honestly, most of the people in District 8 are homeowners, and our property taxes are high. As we know, DeKalb County, I think, is in the top 5 in the state as far as property taxes. Now, I'm not saying that there's a magic way to cut property taxes. Of course, 2/3 of the tax goes to the schools. And I think probably all of us are in favor of funding schools. Well, certainly property tax is not as significant as the schools, of course, but it is an important part of our revenue base. So I think we've got to be very careful about spending. There's a lot of demands being put upon our revenue in this county. For many reasons. The virus is one, criminal justice, our sheriff's department, our health department, all of those are a lot of demands being put on them, particularly now because of the virus and other things. So property taxes are going to, unfortunately, probably going to remain high. I think we want to make sure that they don't go a lot higher. And that's a challenge. There's no question that's a challenge. Thank you.
All right, and we'll go with Chris. Same question. What are your two most pressing issues that you believe are facing your district, and what are your solutions?
First of all, I wouldn't specifically disagree with anything that's been said so far on this. I think everybody is correct in general on those kinds of issues. I would put, as a general issue, I would put COVID and Black Lives Matter as the most pressing things to us right now. I would add, in agreement with Bill, I think property taxes and the budget is a very important issue. And I think economic development is a very important issue, both of those things. We've made some great strides recently in economic development, especially with Facebook and Ferrara and things like that. That's all good stuff, and that will help us out. But we need to continue to do that. We need to continue to do that so we have economic opportunities for people. With regard to taxes in the budget, I don't think we've done a good enough job of explaining taxes and budget. And I might want to turn to Bill on this as an accountancy professor who has some background in that. But I think we need to do a lot more to explain to people what the taxes are, how they're split up, how little we get of this, because most of it goes to the schools, as Bill said, and secondarily to highways and sheriff. That's where most of the money goes. But people need to understand where their taxes are going, and people need to understand how the budget is established for the county. And I don't think we've we've made a good faith effort, I think, on the county's point, from the county's side. But we need to do a better job, and maybe the media can help us on this, for explaining how the budget is developed and how if you give more money here, that means you aren't giving more money over here. Those kinds of things. Thank you.
All right. Next question. We'll start with let's start with Bill first. Talking about the budget, obviously there are implications based upon what we've seen happen with the pandemic. Businesses were closed for quite a long time. A lot of them haven't been able to reopen to the capacity that we would have seen pre-pandemic. People are struggling financially, and that has implications with whether or not they can pay their property taxes, whether they can pay their utility bills, all those kinds of things. Do you guys think there's any wiggle room in the county budget as it stands right now? And if so, where would you make those cuts? And we'll start with Bill first.
Okay. I don't know about wiggle room. There may be, but that remains to be seen. I guess if I'm elected and get on the board, then I'll know a little more about that. The trouble with the time we're in now is it's kind of a double whammy because our revenue is being stressed because now property taxes fortunately are not highly variable due to the economic conditions. There's some variation in them, but not a lot. But other kinds of sources of revenue, road taxes, and sales tax. I believe the county gets a little bit of sales tax. And when sales go down, as they have over the last 6 months or so, we get less sales tax. And so there's pressure from there. And then as a number of us have said, the demands on the revenue that we get are greater and going to be greater over at least the next year. Or so, as the effects of the virus really are more evident than they already have been. More services needed, and I think Chris also mentioned about Black Lives Matter and the all of the implications of that. And again, we may talk about this later, but I believe there's probably need for more training in our sheriff's department, and of course the police departments we don't deal with so much at the county level, but I think our officers and our deputies are probably going to be in need of some additional training, and that costs money. So there probably isn't, unfortunately, and I wish I could say, oh, there's a whole bunch of waste, fraud, and abuse in the county budget, and if we just would get rid of all of that, but that's too easy of an answer, and it's not often It's not often true. Yes, sometimes there is areas of waste, and certainly we should root out any areas of waste or fraud or abuse that we would find in the county budget. We certainly should do that, but that's probably fairly limited as to how much there is.
All right, and we'll go with Sasha next. Same question. Do you believe that there's any wiggle room in the county budget? And if so, where would you make those changes?
Well, I think the hard reality is that there has to be wiggle room in the county budget, because we have a year where so many people have lost their primary sources of income, people have lost their secondary sources of income, and simply meeting property tax obligations is going to be immensely difficult for many residents. I don't want to see the county put liens on homes over property tax payments. I would like to see some form of deferral for those who have lost their jobs. And I know that's going to be very difficult to make add up. I accept that. But there are very much places that we can afford to move money out of the budget, and spending that's been proposed that I would be opposed to, such as the $755,000 that the county board is currently deliberating spending on bringing in outside corporations. I believe that if we're going to work to bring more jobs into DeKalb, we should bring it by incubating businesses from people already here and supporting the small businesses that are already here that would expand. And that will additionally increase our tax base. In terms of cuts, I think the Sheriff's Department is a great place to start. You know, as much as it's nice to say, oh, a little more training will help, the research really doesn't bear out that training has an exceptionally positive effect on reduction in use of force incidents. Until we actually discuss the reality that our system was built in a foundationally unjust way. It's not broken, it's doing what it was designed to do, and that is oppress people. And until we take that apart and shift funding towards community services and away from the Sheriff's Department, we won't be able to move forward as a community.
All right, and we'll go with Neil next. Neil, same question. Do you believe that there's any wiggle room in the budget? And if so, where would you make those changes?
Yeah, I mean, I would say wiggle room, no. You know, wiggle room to me, and I don't want to read too much into the question, but wiggle room to me suggests that, you know, there's low-hanging fruit, that there's things that should have been done 5 years ago, 10 years ago to tighten the belt. I would resist that characterization. I mean, I think that, you know, we've had broad bipartisan consensus behind previous budgets. I think if there were, and plenty of folks from both sides of the aisle, if there was money to be found just lying on the sidewalk, I think somebody would have found it by now. Now, that said, cuts will have to be made, but I would just urge, and this goes maybe back to Chris's point about how do we educate the voting population on how taxes work. If you look nationally, you know, estimates in terms of tax shortfall for state and local governments is 5, 10, 15%. That's a lot, and that's a hole that's only going to be filled in the most general, broadest sense by federal aid, which is beyond, you know, that's above our pay grade. But that's the kind of shortfall we're talking about here. So I shudder to think about cutting more. I think we've cut a lot in previous years. I mean, you guys remember that the health department, you know, asked for a millage bond opportunity a couple of years ago, and unfortunately that was defeated. Probably could have used a more robust health department right about now. I would underline that as well for folks watching this exchange. But I think we're inheriting a decent position. I tip my cap to previous administrations for both passing budgets at all, passing them with consensus, and thankfully for those of us vying for office in 2020, they passed them with a pretty healthy cash reserve as well. So I can imagine that being a factor. Because to Sasha's point, to wrap this up, the last thing anyone wants on either side of the aisle in this discussion is to start imposing penalties and liens on property tax owners who really, truly, those of them who really, truly just do not have the ability to pay due to job loss or whatever else.
All right, and Kara, we'll go with you next. Same question. Do you believe there's any wiggle room in the county budget? And if so, what changes would you make?
Okay, As far as wiggle room, I'm not quite sure. I'm going to be very open with you and very honest with you. I have little knowledge to exactly where the taxes goes and who they go to. So I really can't quite answer that question. However, I do believe that the sheriff department budget should be reviewed and clearly explained on where the money, where the revenue is being used for, and in hopes that some type of revenue could be given back to our community. So that's my answer.
All right, and Chris, same question. Do you believe there's any wiggle room in the budget? And if so, what changes would you make?
I agree. I don't think there's much wiggle room in the budget. There may be some little things, as Bill said, there may be some little things we can do, and that should be taken care of. But I don't think there's much at all. But you can always talk about reprioritizing. And that's a difficult thing to do. But if we're going to get serious about protecting people, about helping people that are in need, we may need to change some things. And I think that's reasonable. I chair Health and Human Services Committee for the county, and we need more money for health and human services. We just do. Neil is exactly right. We should have passed the health department increase a few years ago. We'd be better off. The mental health people need more money. Mental health, broadly defined, need more money. As Sasha said, I think, about the movie theater and parking lot, the community gardens people, Dan Kenny and that group, they're great. They do wonderful work, and we need to help them. And I'd love to be able to help them more. We gave Dan an increase for community gardens in the last budget year for the senior tax levy. And we're very happy to do that. We would have loved to have given him more. Same with elder services, things like that. We would really love to be able to give social services more money. It's not there unless we're taking it away from somebody. And that requires a very serious, very open. It's a vulnerable situation. But if we're going to start reassigning some money, you got to have that kind of an open discussion. Thanks.
All right, so next series of questions, I'm going to piggyback off of a little bit of what everybody was talking about, which is, allocating budget money. And, this obviously comes from everybody, across the county, not just in the city of DeKalb, but in many, many, many districts. We've seen, protests and renewed sort of local calls for change as it relates to policing, as it relates to police budgets, as it relates to housing. Obviously, the DeKalb County Board, as part of their budget process, oversees the DeKalb County Sheriff's Department. Some of you have touched on this a little bit, but I'd like to hear more of your thoughts. And we'll start with Sasha first. Have we done Sasha first yet? And we will do, so we'll start with that. And so in relation specifically to the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office, do you support reallocating funds from the office to other services? Why or why not?
Absolutely. We have heard the calls and the demands of those who have been marching for justice in our streets for almost 200 days now. And it is high time that we listened. It is high time that we implemented radical and transformative change. Small reforms around the edges are not going to lead to a just society. They may make people feel good. They may make nice campaign slogans, but until we talk about truly radical change, things like ending cash bail, we're not moving anywhere. So I would like to start by reallocating a sizable portion of the Sheriff's Department budget towards mental health services, particularly as relates to addiction, drug crimes, crimes, really should be air quoted there, make up a sizable percentage of what what law enforcement spend their time on. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I believe at the county level, we should decriminalize possession in personal use quantities and reallocate funding so that we can treat addiction as a mental health issue. When you do that, you start to reduce levels of addiction and levels of associated crime with addiction. So we can have a net positive effect on the rate of crime, decreased property crime, decreased violent crime, while also shifting funds away from the sheriff's department. And that's where we need to be headed.
All right, and we'll go with Kiara next. Same question in relation to the DeKalb County budget as it relates to the county sheriff's office. Do you support reallocating funds from the sheriff's office to other services? Why or why not?
Yes, I believe that the county board, we must work with the sheriff's department to head off potentially fraudulent inequities in the Black community. As far as reducing like maybe pension costs, those, I just believe that the revenue there, it could definitely be of great value to the community. There are so many things, like I once said before, that I know will help our community out. You know, as going back on what Sasha said, community resources, community centers, these things are needed here. And the list goes on. I can sit for hours and tell you what I know for a fact will bring value to the community within. You know, DeKalb is not a dangerous place or a bad place. It's just that there's a lack of resources, a lack of opportunities here. And, you know, I've marched here quite a few times. And it's not that, you know, it's not that there aren't resources nearby, but there's none locally. The community would be so much better if, you know, they actually just sat down and listened and planned on giving us exactly what we ask and, you know, we demand. So I do believe that the sheriff department, we're gonna have to really press the issue. And I'm not a fan of going against, but I am all about working together, coming with solutions together. So if we're able to discuss these matters and the needs here and where the revenue can go, and I'm sure, you know, if they're open-minded and have an understanding for the community, then it won't be no issue. So there you go.
All right, and we'll go with Chris next. Same question as it relates to the budget and the sheriff's office. Do you support reallocating funds from the sheriff's office to other services? Why or why not?
I definitely support looking at reallocating some money. I think that's fine. I would like to have those discussions. I think there may be some things that we can do where we limit the standard traditional police interaction and replace that with counselor interaction. Mental health counselors, social workers, whatever. I think there may be things we can do there. I think that's fine. I don't think it's fair to say we're going to solve our problem by taking some money from the county sheriff and giving it to somebody else. It has to be a lot more complex than that. And it may be that we're taking money from a number of different places and giving that money to social services for counselors. I think that's quite possible. And the other thing that comes to mind, I was just thinking about that as Kiara was talking. There are probably going to be some cops who the bright part of their day is helping out somebody who needs to talk to a counselor. There may be some cops who'd much rather be counselors. And unfortunately, they're set in this situation where they carry a gun and a badge and they got to enforce something. And that's not a real good setting. for anybody. So bottom line, look into using counselors much more and police less. And if that involves some money transfers, I'm in favor of it.
All right, and we'll go with Bill next. Same question regarding the county budget as it relates to the sheriff's office. Do you support reallocating funds from the office to other services? Why or why not?
I guess I have to say I would agree with Chris quite a bit on this one. Reallocation certainly is something that should be closely examined. I suspect if we had Sheriff Scott here and we asked him about his officers handling mental health crises, he'd be very happy to hand that off to someone else. You know, we expect an awful lot of our police and our sheriff's deputies these days in handling, because a lot of what they do, I'm afraid, does involve people who are in a mental health crisis. And so I think, yes, there may need to be some reallocation toward counselors and other mental health professionals who could step in a situation. Now, remember too, that reallocation involves personnel. Most budgets in government are personnel dollars. Something like 80%. I don't know if that's exactly true with the county budget, but it's pretty high, that are personnel. So when you talk about reallocating, we're talking about perhaps shifting personnel dollars from one place to another. And that, of course, that's people's jobs. And, you know, we have to look at, you know, do we have a sufficient number of deputies in our sheriff's department to maintain an orderly society? Is there a way that we could perhaps reallocate some of those dollars? Maybe we do have some deputies who would love to do mental health counseling instead of carrying the badge and a gun. And if that's possible, certainly it's something we got to closely look at. But you know, the whole thing here is achieving a balance, I think, between you know, a good lawful society and but meeting people's needs. And certainly when we have people who are in mental health crises, we need to have a way of helping them.
All right, and Neil, same question as it relates to the county budget with the sheriff's office. Do you support reallocating funds from the sheriff's office to other services? If so, why or why not?
Yeah, so I think before addressing the question, I guess I want to do one thing and try to put a human face on the issue. And this is, I mean, frankly, an embarrassing story to tell, but something that I had not ever heard or been told, and I say this to somebody who started kindergarten at Lincoln Elementary in 1985 and graduated high school from DHS in 1999. At nowhere in that 14 or 15 years had I ever been told that once upon a time, DeKalb was actually considered a sundown town. I learned that for the first time in the summer of 2017 when I was running for office previously. And so I underline that just to kind of call out that, you know, this is out there, and we do a better job of addressing those issues, obviously, when we both solicit candidates, but also, maybe even more importantly, solicit people's stories and experiences. And so I just want to congratulate everyone involved locally, particularly in the local BLM chapter, for, you know, taking that leadership role and really calling it out and making it explicit. This is an issue, I think it's a challenge from a county board perspective, just because, and I say this as somebody, you know, District 9 is entirely within DeKalb city limits. There's nothing that the county board is going to do to change the operation of the DeKalb Police Department, or frankly, a lot of other things inside the city of DeKalb as a home rule city. That said, you know, we can use our influence around the margins with respect to setting budget priorities. I think priorities, I like Chris's word from earlier, that is the right word for it. I think we do have some momentum in this area. You know, DeKalb County's been progressive with things like the establishment of the drug for, you know, dealing with nonviolent drug crimes and people who are much more in need of intervention than they are retribution. I'd like to see that expand. The one final thought I guess I have is that, you know, a great breakthrough, I believe this was earlier this year, was the county board coming to an agreement with Sheriff Scott, who, to Bill's point, has been at this a long time. I think Sheriff Scott was probably the sheriff when I was in school at Lincoln Elementary once upon a time, to make sure that all the sheriffs in the sheriff's department have body cams. And I would just say, I'm looking forward to seeing those used. And, you know, God forbid if there were ever a allegation of brutality involving the sheriff's department, I would expect that those cameras were on and being used correctly.
All right, and I think we have time for one more question before we do our closing statements. So, you know, this has to do with both the pandemic and the budget, right? So, you know, when we talk about, and I think it was Chris has mentioned it, or maybe it was Bill mentioned it earlier, you know, the idea of property taxes. A lot of that, you know, is has to do with things outside of the county control, but you know, obviously that's a big issue for all of our readers all the time. Property tax burden. You know, with the understanding of the answers that you said about wiggle room in the budget, you know, what, if anything, can be done, especially in this time of pandemic with financial constraints, to reduce that property tax burden on residents, and how would you go about doing that? And we'll start with Kiara.
Can you please repeat that question? I'm sorry, my son came down here.
Sure. That's okay. Everyone's, you know, that's what happens when we got to work from home, right? Okay, so when we talk about property tax burden, what, if anything, can be done to reduce that burden on DeKalb County residents, and how would you go about doing that?
Okay, so property tax burden. That's somewhat I have to think of. Yeah, I have to really think on that one. Let's see. Okay, so 1 second. Is there a way you can come back to me with that one? You know, I did not receive the questionnaire ahead of time, so like it's kind of new to me.
Sure.
So is there a way you just come right back to me, give me a little time to think on that?
Sure. How about we go with, let's go with Sasha first. What, if anything, can be done to reduce the property tax burden on DeKalb County residents?
Well, I think that we have to look at the property tax deferral program that the state provides for people over the age of 62 and consider requesting Springfield pass an expansion of that to cover this year and this year alone, people who have been impacted through job loss due to COVID-19. Now, I understand that that's going to have to come at the state level, but I think that if elected to the county board, I'd be more than willing to work with my colleagues from all three sides of the aisle, if I was elected, to lobby our legislators up in Springfield, because the simple reality is we cannot be in a position where we're placing liens on people's homes because they lost their job during a pandemic. It's problematic enough what we put seniors through with a deferral scheme that looks more like a reverse mortgage than anything else. But for the time being, proposing something like that at a higher level is going to be a necessity.
All right, and we'll go with Chris next. What, if anything, can be done to reduce the property tax burden on residents?
I was thrilled when Doug Johnson, well, I don't know who actually came up with it to begin with, but when we ended up with a property tax deferment from the first installment, moving it back to the second. And I think that was wonderful. And I'd be in favor of us looking into that again. I think I go with Sasha on this. I think that anything else else is going to come from the state. I think that we should try to do what we can, what's practical for us to do locally. I think that's fine. But any kind of anything that does anything more than putting things off for a few months is going to have to come from the state. I would wonder, we need to do a whole revamping on how property taxes are used, and what we use, what kind of funds we use for different kinds of purposes. And maybe this fair tax thing amendment would help us out on that. Maybe the state can raise some more money through that fair tax thing, and bring that back to other purposes to provide relief. I don't know, but I think most of the tax relief issue has to come from the state.
All right, and we'll go with Neil next. Same question. What, if anything, can be done to reduce the property tax burden on residents?
Sure. In the interest of full disclosure, I think we've all picked up some bad habits since COVID hit in March. One of my bad habits has been getting into arguments on local Facebook threads about property taxing. So that maybe even for an aspiring public official, maybe a little bit too much time thinking about this. I would say a couple of things. One is that let's be clear on what the property tax is. It's a tax on wealth. And a lot of folks in this county are hurting. A lot of folks in this county don't have the ability necessarily to look at a tax bill that's gone from $2,000 to $4,000 or $4,000 to $8,000. That said, I seem to hear from a lot of folks whose property tax burden has gone up because their home appreciated in value. And so I want to distinguish between people who actually are suffering economic hardship and those who are taking advantage of that issue to claim economic hardship that may or may not be true. And I think the county board's got a role as community leaders in talking to that issue and trying to combat some misinformation. We are sort of at the mercy, as folks have said, of state legislation at this level. We are a state, like number of states, whose school districts are funded basically nearly entirely through local property tax assessments. And so until we reform that system, which is another one of those unfortunately above our pay grade as DeKalb County elected officials, I want to be realistic about how much can change. The one thing I would recommend here, to Chris's last point, is we have an ability finally in this state to do something meaningful, not the entire solution, but a meaningful step in addressing how backwards and retrograde taxation is in Illinois by passing the fair tax. This is tax whose incidence is going to change in the average, in the marginal tax rate. The incidence of that tax is going to fall on people making more than $250,000 a year. Now, DeKalb County, the median income is somewhere between $46,000 and $50,000 a year, last I looked. So I just want to put that in perspective, kind of who that tax burden is falling on. Frankly, it's falling on people who have not been paying their fair share for an awful long time. And so I would just, again, outside of our control, certainly as county board candidates, but I want to urge anyone viewing this video after the fact to please support the ballot amendment for the fair income tax.
All right, we'll go with Bill next. What, if anything, can be done to reduce the property tax burden on residents?
Reducing property taxes is really tough. And I'll tell you what I maybe is a dirty secret. Most people in government taxes go down because the property tax is a fairly constant stream of income. It's not like income tax. Income taxes go down when economic activity go down. And so oftentimes local officials really don't like income taxes as much for that reason. But it's going to be tough. I would take another point of view on all of this, and that is, why not look to ways to increase revenue rather than trying to cut expenditures? Yes, certainly any waste we should cut that, but assuming that that isn't going to produce a whole lot, economic development. And we've already had, you know, 2 really good cases in this county with Ferrara and Facebook, both building very large facilities on now. Who's going to get most of that money? The schools, of course, but the county, the cities, DeKalb, Sycamore, and others will gain from that, from those 2 developments. And that's a way of getting the revenue pie bigger. And so it gives us some more revenue. The increase in property values, of course, is often looked upon, and I've been on the library board for a number of years, and, you know, we look at increased in assessed valuation, we say, oh, good, you know, more money, because, you know, even if we keep our tax rate the same, on a bigger assessed valuation, we're going to take in some more money. So, you know, one way that the county and the city and other taxing bodies, if they, instead of just letting more revenue roll in from increased valuations, they would keep their tax levies the same as before. So that's a way of doing it, but it's tough. I'm not going to say that's an easy thing to do, because there are always demands for more money. You know, we all would like to have more employees. We'd like to have bigger pensions. There's, you know, a lot of things, but so we got to be really careful. And I think the county has to be really careful in the next few years about spending, even though there's going to be demands to do so.
Can I add one thing to Bill's comment there? Actually, I want to kind of bolt on to something there, which is that, you know, the point about economic development and, you know, hopefully growing the pie. This doesn't have to be, you know, an exercise in just slicing what we already have, but hopefully expanding what we have. That to me also demonstrates, I'm jealous of Chris's visitor in his camera there. That also demonstrates why this can't just be an exercise in only cutting. You know, we use words like economic development and market development, at least in the private sector. I think this is true in the public sector as well. Economic development or business development is really marketing and sales. And whatever it took to do the work, which, you know, is work that frankly, I think we're all probably a little uncomfortable with, the idea that you got to get out there and, you know, compete with other localities and get in this race to the bottom. Nonetheless, in that case, that seems to have paid off dramatically with Facebook and with Ferrara. And having the ability to do the outreach work that would have led to those agreements required effort and frankly spending up front. So when we can find those opportunities to promote DeKalb County, attract business development, do it in a sensible way that's not bankrupting ourselves in the short term, that's how we get to the expanded tax and revenue base that Bill's describing. And that is only possible to the extent that we, you know, prioritize that going forward in subsequent budgets.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and Kiara, I just wanted to give you one more chance to talk about property taxes.
Okay, can you hear me clearly?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay, so as far as the reducing of the taxes, I do believe that reducing the costs of the county government level, it can help reduce taxes, but however, I do feel like it's gonna take team effort. And with that, working with the intergovernmental affair, revenue recovery will help with this issue as well, and just being able to explore the public-private partnerships that, you know, that can also be of help as well.
All right, you guys, so we're gonna go ahead and go into our closing statements. Thanks again for all your answers to the questions. So you'll each have 2 minutes to just tell us a little about why you're the best candidate for this role, why we should vote for you. And we'll start with Bill.
Okay. Well, thank you for holding this event. And, you know, I have to say, I'm very heartened by all of my fellow candidates here. I think you guys have a lot of good ideas, and you know, I wish we could all be on the board, but only certain ones of us will be. But that's all right. But I think there are a lot of good ideas and a lot of sincere people who really care a lot about this county, and I think that's very important. I've been a resident of this county for 36 years, and I came to NIU in 1984 and have been here ever since. And you know, I think you know, we have an excellent county here, a wonderful county where we have some wealth, fortunately, from our agricultural base that we have, but we're gaining some wealth from other things like Ferrara and Facebook, as we just mentioned, and more of that can be done. I truly believe that we can do that and increase the size of the pie. I think my experience has been, obviously I have an accounting background. I'm a CPA, although I was not a practicing CPA, but I passed the exam, say it that way. And so I think I understand financial things pretty well. I've been on the library board for a number of years. I've been the president the last couple of years and have learned a lot about property taxes and levies and things like that, which are all part of the property tax game that we're involved with. But I think I'm a good listener. I think I like to listen to both sides of issues and make a measured and careful decision about things. I don't really have a strong agenda coming into this race. There are not just a number of things that, man, I'm going to promise people I'm going to do, but I think I would be a good representative of our area and certainly sincere in my desire to represent our area well. So thanks very much for doing this.
All right, and Sasha, go ahead.
All right, so I feel that the main reason that I would be the best choice for the 5th District is accountability. I think it's incredibly important that any elected representative is accountable to the people that elected them. And to that end, I think possibly most important campaign promise is that I will keep my campaign Facebook page up and my website if elected, and I will put out a statement after every single county board vote explaining what was voted upon and why I voted the way that I did. It is immensely important that any elected official is public facing, deals with constituents, and has an accessible platform that people can go online, that they can see. And that's something that is not currently happening in the 5th District. I think that's an incredibly important thing for everybody that lives here. I also think that I bring a unique and different vision to the race. You know, typically we see Democrats versus Republicans, and I come from a third party, yet in this race, I'm not the third party candidate, I'm simply the other candidate. And I think that having somebody who sits on the board and doesn't have a specific partisan allegiance to one of the larger factions would be a good thing to increase accountability for other members as well. I want to thank the Chronicle for hosting this event. Thank you, Kelsey, for moderating, and let the voters know that if you'd like to hear more about me and my platform, you can find me on Facebook at Sasha for DeKalb and online at Sasha for, the letter 4, DeKalb.com, where I have a more expanded platform. There's contact information. Feel free to reach out if anybody in the community wants to know more about me, my campaign, why I'm running. Thank you.
All right, and Neil, go ahead.
Great, thanks. No, thanks Kelsey and Chronicle for the venue. I realized at some point that my first job back in the day as a 7th grader was to be a DeKalb Chronicle paper boy. So it's nice to come full circle and
That's awesome.
be back where it all started. No, appreciate the opportunity to serve, and I look forward to serving because I like to think that I can speak to the breadth of experience in DeKalb County. My folks moved here, like I said, when I was 4. My brother was newly born. Went through DeKalb Public Schools. Eventually, went on to different things. My mom's secretary at NIU. My dad was worked at Kmart before that closed. And from those beginnings, I was able to get a college education. Went to the University of Michigan later and got a PhD in political science, focusing on American foreign policy. Later, ended up in the private sector in this healthcare role that I am now. I only mention all that because not that special or interesting, frankly. But you should vote for me. But not because I'm special or unique, but rather because I know I have what I have and I am where I am, thanks to the work that previous generations of DeKalb County leaders, what they did, what they established, and what they were able to achieve, whether that was quality schools or sports leagues or safe communities. I'm just more than thrilled to have the opportunity to make the same opportunities available for younger people in DeKalb and DeKalb County today. So thanks so much for having me again. Neil Mohammed, District 9 Democrat.
All right, and Kiara, go ahead.
Okay, I'm in a better position to be the voice of my community, as a parent, as a community activist, and as a generational influencer. I bring trustworthiness, and I am present. I'm not just sitting behind a laptop or behind a desk and speaking and voicing my opinions. I'm actually present. I'm out here walking along these sidewalks, the streets, and communicating with the residents. I am here as a listening ear. I am here solving issues behind the scenes. I'm doing, the work physically. So I just believe that me being in this chair, representing District 5, I can just better relate. I can, and like I said again, I'm just here. I'm just not talking, via Zoom or anything like that. My residents, they see me, the community, they see me, they hear me, they know me, they trust me. So that's why I feel like I'm the best candidate for District 5.
All right, and Chris, go ahead.
I'm a Midwesterner, and we aren't good about talking about why we're the best. I'm a good candidate. I've been doing the job. I want to continue doing the job. I will work hard for you. But what I really want to say is the county board works. And part of the reason the county board works is because of people that you see here. Some are on the county board and some aren't, but people who want to be involved in the county and want to, as Bill said, do listening to both sides and making a measured decision. That's what we're supposed to be all about. And we can talk, I'm a Democrat, I'm a liberal Democrat, but we can talk about those kinds of party labels. And it's cool to see a libertarian, by the way. But anyway, we can talk about that, and you can make decisions based on those kinds of labels if you want to. What you really see here is a group of people who want to help out. And the best thing the voters can do is choose one, however you want to choose one. But know that county board works because county board is not a heavily partisan situation. We don't fight it out. We know there's Democrats in the county board. We know there's Republicans in the county board. We know that the farmers are maybe thinking one way more than the people in the city are thinking. But that's not really an issue. We listen to each other and we explain our positions and we make measured decisions. And that's the way it works. And it works well in our county board. It has worked well for the last several years anyway. And I'm assuming it will continue to do that way. So I'm really thankful for the Chronicle doing this. I'm thankful for my specific opponent, Bill, and everybody else here for being interested and wanting to make a commitment to serve. And that's says well to all of us, and says well about the county and the citizens here. So that's all I got.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining me today. I so appreciate it. Just a reminder to our viewers who will see this, the election is November 3rd. Early voting actually began in DeKalb County on Thursday. The only early voting site open right now is the Legislative Center in Sycamore, but other ones, including in the DeKalb Township, in Kirkland, on NIU campus, and in Sandwich, will open October 19th. For more information on all of the DeKalb County Board candidates and everybody else on the local ballot, you are encouraged to go to our Daily Chronicle website, www.daily-chronicle.com. We have an election central right on the homepage. You just click on the yellow banner on the top. And thank you guys so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.